still functional. But the footage is gone. He looked at Karen. And unless you'd like us to inspect your 3 other drones registered under this name, I'd recommend stepping back and reconsidering your role in this HOA. Karen's face turned a shade I can only describe as microwave meatloaf. The president. The next morning arrived with the kind of deceptive stillness that usually means trouble is already in motion somewhere out of sight. The lake was glassy, the air was warm, and birds chirped like nothing had happened the night before. But the sense of calm only made the tension feel heavier. My wife poured herself coffee like always, but I could see the subtle change in how she scanned the tree line, how she paused near the window just long enough to feel watched. Karen had retreated, yes, but not defeated. And people like her don't sulk quietly. They simmer, strategize, and scheme until they find some twisted way to regain control. It didn't take long. By mid-morning, we heard the unmistakable growl of heavy tires crunching gravel, and both of us stepped out onto the porch at the same time. What came up the drive was not Karen's usual silver SUV, but a large white work van with the HOA's emblem magnetically slapped onto the side. Following it, like a circus parade, came 2 trucks hauling trailers filled with metal fencing panels, orange plastic cones, signs, and a stack of laminated papers flapping in the wind. At the front of the convoy stood Karen, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, her red blazer even brighter in the sun, like a warning light refusing to be ignored. She marched up the path before the tires even stopped spinning, waving a clipboard like a weapon forged from pure pettiness. This property is being cordoned off for unauthorized renovations pending official HOA review, she announced to no one in particular, though her voice carried like she had a megaphone. This is temporary until all paperwork is verified and all complaints are addressed. I raised an eyebrow. What paperwork? My wife stepped beside me, already eyeing the signs the workers were pulling off the trailer. One read HOA violation area, do not enter. Another read pending review by enforcement committee. Karen smirked. Turns out your house is 4 inches outside of the permitted setback zone, which, by regulation, qualifies it as encroachment onto communal land. Until that's settled, the surrounding area must remain sealed off. She spun the clipboard around to show a map with a red circle that conveniently included our driveway, front lawn, mailbox, and even part of the porch. I submitted an emergency motion at last night's executive board meeting, she continued, and as acting vice chair of temporary enforcements, I've been granted special authority to implement zone containment until further notice. My wife took a deep breath. You invented a title just for this, didn't you? Karen didn't blink. The board agreed unanimously. I stared at the crew, who had already begun unloading fencing and were hammering stakes into the dirt like this was just another Tuesday. And who's paying for all this? I asked. Karen gave a tight smile. Temporary assessment. All members. Including you? My wife didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply walked down the steps, picked up one of the signs, and examined it like it had landed from another planet. Then she turned it over, revealing a sticker on the back that read Property of City Works Division. She looked at Karen. You borrowed these from municipal storage. Karen's face twitched. They were made available. Unauthorized use of city property for private enforcement, my wife said calmly. You realize what that means? It's a gray area, Karen snapped. It's temporary. My wife turned to the workers, who had now fenced off our mailbox and were attempting to loop the orange tape around a perfectly innocent rose bush. Who's your supervisor? She asked. One of them, a kid barely old enough to rent a car, mumbled a name and glanced nervously at Karen. My wife dialed a number on her phone and stepped away. We heard her speaking in that clipped, official tone she hadn't used since she left the service. The tone that said paperwork was already moving faster than you could backpedal. Karen tried to hold her ground, but her eyes kept flicking to the phone call, to the workers, to the growing awareness that things were slipping. My wife returned a minute later and said nothing. She didn't have to. 5 minutes after that, a small city vehicle pulled into the lot, and out stepped a woman in a navy utility vest with a clipboard of her own. Only hers had actual authority behind it. She walked directly to the fencing crew. "I need to see your deployment orders," she said. The kid handed her a form, which she read slowly. Then she turned to Karen. "This permit is forged." Karen sputtered. "It's a template." "It's a felony," the inspector said without blinking. "Removal of municipal property and impersonation of city personnel. You're looking at theft, fraud, and trespassing." Karen's lips moved, but no sound came out. The workers were already backing toward their trailers. One of them muttered, "I told you this was sketchy," before climbing in and driving off. Within minutes, the fencing was being loaded back up. The signs were yanked from the grass, the cones tossed into bins, and the whole ridiculous operation disappeared in reverse like it had been a fever dream. The inspector handed my wife a copy of the report. "You may want to file this with the county. It'll help if she tries anything else." Karen stood there, paralyzed, her clipboard suddenly less of a weapon and more of a paperweight. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she looked up at my wife and hissed under her breath, "This isn't over. You think you're clever, but I know things. I have connections." My wife tilted her head. "So do I. The difference is, mine have badges." Karen stormed off again, but this time her steps didn't sound confident. They sounded desperate. Which made what happened next even stranger. For 3 full days, Karen disappeared. No sightings. No warnings. No drones or fences or strange men with leaf blowers blocking our driveway. The silence was almost relaxing. But on the 4th day, we received a letter in the mailbox that changed everything. It was an official-looking envelope, sealed in gold foil, with an embossed HOA crest that I'd never seen before. Inside was a formal notice of a special tribunal hearing to assess community compliance grievances, scheduled at the HOA's main hall, with a subpoena demanding our attendance. "She's holding a trial," my wife said, reading it aloud. "A literal HOA tribunal." I took the paper, scanned it, and found the list of charges. Unauthorized hosting of public events. Destruction of aerial surveillance property. Disrespecting acting enforcement officials. There were 7 in total, all worded in that cryptic legalese that made it sound like we'd declared independence from a suburban monarchy. "This is her last shot," I said. "She's throwing the book at us." My wife smiled. "Good. Let her. I've got something to throw back." I looked at her. "You've been holding something in reserve, haven't you?" She sipped her tea. "Only what she made me prepare for." I didn't ask further. I knew better. But deep down I could feel it. Something was about to shift. Karen wasn't done, not yet. She was going to drag this into the one place she thought she still had control, the HOA courtroom. What she didn't know was that my wife had been summoned to far worse tribunals than any Karen-led boardroom. And this time, she wasn't just going to defend herself. She was going to flip the entire table. The day of the tribunal started with the kind of weather that felt like a warning. Heavy gray clouds rolled over the lake, and the air was thick, heavy, and charged, like it knew something dramatic was about to unfold. My wife dressed in a quiet, precise way that I recognized immediately, the kind of calm preparation that always meant trouble for someone on the other side. She wore a simple navy jacket, the kind with sharp shoulders and subtle authority, paired with jeans and boots that could handle any terrain. I, on the other hand, felt like I was gearing up for an absurd reality show, because that's exactly what this so-called tribunal felt like. We walked up the path to the HOA main hall, a squat building that looked like it was built entirely out of wood paneling and judgment. Karen's silver SUV was parked diagonally across 2 spaces like she owned the entire lot. She was already inside, I knew it, probably stacking papers like weapons, ready to declare victory before anyone had spoken a word. As we entered the hall, I felt the shift in atmosphere. There were folding chairs lined up in stiff rows, a long table at the front with the HOA board members looking unusually solemn, and Karen standing beside a projector with a smug smile plastered across her face. She was in full performance mode, wearing that red blazer again and a string of pearls so aggressively shiny that they might have been powered by spite. The moment she saw us, Her smile stretched wider. "Welcome," she said, voice dripping with fake politeness. "We're so glad you could make it to this important hearing." My wife gave her the kind of nod that said nothing but promised everything. We sat down in the second row while Karen cleared her throat theatrically. "As you all know," she began, "we are gathered here today to address multiple, repeated, and frankly shocking violations of our community guidelines by the residents of Lot 37. These infractions not only undermine the harmony of our neighborhood but also threaten the integrity of our shared spaces." She clicked a button on the projector, and a grainy slideshow began to play. The first image was of our porch, with my wife holding the butterfly net during the drone incident. Karen's voice rose in triumph. "Here we see blatant interference with authorized HOA equipment. A dangerous act, endangering community safety and property." The next slide showed the fish fry. "Unauthorized gatherings, exceeding guest limits, with potential food safety violations. I've been informed there was catfish served without proper permits." A murmur of confusion rippled through the audience, because no one had ever heard of a fish permit. Karen ignored it and moved on to a blurry photo of my wife planting flowers. "Non-compliant color schemes, directly in violation of Section 5.3.2, which clearly states that outdoor decorative items must conform to pre-approved earthy tones." My wife leaned over to me and whispered, "Is she suggesting beige flowers?" I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Karen wrapped up her presentation with a dramatic flourish. "Therefore, I propose the following sanctions: immediate suspension of Lot 37's community privileges, a fine for damages, and mandatory compliance training for both residents." She stepped back from the projector like she just delivered a keynote speech at a dictatorship convention. The HOA President, who was sitting in the center of the board table, looked at Karen for a long moment before turning his gaze to my wife. "Would you like to respond?" he asked. My wife stood, moved to the front of the room, and placed both hands on the table in a way that was quiet but commanding. "Thank you," she said calmly. "I do have a response." She pulled a folder from her jacket and placed it in front of the president. "What you see in there is a record of every incident Karen has initiated over the last month. Each one documented with timestamps, witnesses, and in some cases, recordings. Including the drone, which, as verified by a state inspector, was used to film private property without consent. That's a violation of state law, not just HOA rules." Karen shifted in her seat, her smile faltering. My wife continued, her voice steady. "You'll also find a letter from the city's property office confirming that our cabin is well within the legal setback requirements. The attempt to fence off our land was unauthorized and involved the theft of municipal property, which we have reported." A ripple of murmurs moved through the board members. Karen tried to interject, but my wife raised a hand slightly. "And lastly," she said, "you'll find a letter from the county sheriff's office, confirming that I am an active consultant for emergency response protocols. That means I'm not just a resident of this community. I have legal authority to escalate matters when necessary, including harassment." Karen's face went red. "This is a smear campaign," she shouted. "She's making herself sound like some kind of law enforcement officer. We don't recognize outside authority here." The HOA president leaned back in his chair. "Karen, she has documented evidence. And I do recognize outside authority, especially when it prevents lawsuits. What you've done with the drone and fencing could land us all in trouble." Karen's mouth opened like she was about to yell, but my wife wasn't done. She clicked the remote on the projector, and suddenly Karen's slideshow was replaced with footage from our porch camera. There was Karen, yelling about IDs, drones buzzing like angry bees, and her waving HOA guidelines like a medieval scroll. The room went silent except for the tinny audio of Karen screaming about trespassing. My wife let it play for a moment, then paused it at the perfect frame, Karen mid-shriek, finger pointing like she was about to banish us to the HOA dungeon. "This," my wife said softly, "is harassment. This is not community building. This is not leadership." Karen tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on. They're exaggerating. They're new here, They don't understand